Hey, welcome to the Master Your Mix podcast. My name is Mike Navina, and thanks for hanging out with me today. Today, my guest is Phil Greiss, and if you're not familiar with him, Phil is a French-Canadian producer, mixer, songwriter, and he has worked on some massive tracks. He works in a ton of different genres, everything from pop, Latin, hip-hop, dance, all sorts of stuff. And he's had a ton of success when it comes to producing and co-writing for artists like Jason Derulo. He helped him work on Savage Love, which was a massive song. He also worked with J Balvin and Willy William to create Gente, which was another massive smash in the Latin dance scene. He's worked with people like Beyoncé, Nicki Minaj, David Guetta, and so many other humongous names in those scenes. Today, we get into some really cool stuff. We get into a lot of his songwriting process and what goes into that. But one of the themes that really comes up throughout this episode is the idea of really trusting your instinct. And Phil is definitely one of those people who instinct is such an important thing that he's created a workflow that supports that quick way of working and allowing him to just really capitalize on what feels right, whether it's in the songwriting stage or whether it's in mixing. He just has really set himself up to be able to work extremely fast and just not look back. And I think that that is a really important thing for all of us listening to pay attention to, because so many of us get so fixated on our ideas or on specific tones, and it becomes so easy to overanalyze and get overcritical and then to lose sight of the big picture. And I think it's this exact reason why a lot of people end up with songs sitting unfinished on their hard drives, or why they're spending months or years, sometimes even finishing their records, finishing their songs. You know, you need a way of working fast and structuring your workflow so that you can do so. And in this interview, Phil gives us a ton of great tips for how to do that. And I think you're going to find them really useful. So with all that said, let's just jump right into it. Phil Greiss, thank you so much for being on the Master Your Mix podcast. How's it going today, man?
Pretty good. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. For people who might not know you or maybe aren't familiar with who you are, what you do, and some of the projects you've worked on, can you give us that background?
Yeah, I've been producing records forever and pretty much like attending every possible kitchen, station that exists in the process of record making. So from writing to composing, arranging, comping vocals, engineering, sound designing, mixing, mastering. So gradually I just started to do more and more. And essentially up until I guess the point, not to the point that the whole process becomes one giant thing, just every step is important. And yeah, I kind of trying to oversee, finishing of records.
Yeah. What got you into this in the first place?
I just always knew. Seriously, this sounds such like a non-answer, but it is true. I remember when I was a kid, I heard this song by Alphaville. Sounds like a melody on the radio, and back then, so it was coming from this little radio that my dad had gave me, and there's a breakdown in the song, and I knew I loved the music, but I loved something else as well. I couldn't put my finger on it. And there's a breakdown, and then you can hear the radio over compression doing something to that breakdown, and then the intensity rises, and then you think you're going to be deafened by a ginormous impact, and something protects you from this. And so this feeling of being protected by whatever, I didn't know what it was. Now I know what it is, some sort of broadcast limit or whatever. It gave me an added love for music, essentially. So it's really the junction of music and its execution and how it's being delivered to your ears that has obsessed me from when I was a kid. And just that way, I just knew it by 6 or 7.
That's amazing. The fact that you could hear compression, and maybe you didn't know it was called compression at the time, but the fact that you could feel it, that's amazing.
I was something is happening that I'm enjoying and I don't know what it is, but I could feel that stuff. I was and I remember when I was a kid, playing video games with my friends Nintendo, and my friend was telling me, yeah, you should come to the house, play this Ninja Gaiden on his NES. Great game, by the way. Ninja Gaiden is the bomb. My obsession was how's the music? Like, is it worth my time to show up? that was, it was that. It's like, you just know, it's my vocation. It's that little voice that's just like always telling me that's your center of interest. So I just followed it. Yeah, it's dumb. It's that, and that's the thing. I think that everybody has that little voice, and life is really whether you choose to have the courage to follow it against all of the advice of your parents and family and friends, or you just, give up on it. So you either give up or you just trust yourself. So I held on. That's it.
I love that, man. I think that's an important message for people to hear too, because that this creative field, there's a lot of negativity thrown at it. A lot of people get that pushback, saying, "Oh, you can't be successful in this or whatever." But I agree with you 100%. You have to believe in yourself. You have to believe in what motivates you and drives you, and pursue that as much as possible.
Completely. It makes the struggle less struggly, if you at least are aligned with what you are. So yeah.
Of course. So then, after hearing this song and falling in love with like this idea of the production, where did you go from there? Did you start learning an instrument, or were you like immediately into the technology? Were you like one of those kids that like wanted to learn how to record right away?
We had a piano at the house, and I was quickly drawn to synthesizers and synthesizer sounds. We had a piano, and I begged my parents to just buy me like a little something that doesn't make necessarily the pure piano sound. And I would have very early on a combination of that was my piano, and on the score little stand it was like a straight piano. Like, how do you call these? The piano droit.
Like an upright piano.
Upright, that's right. Sorry. So the upright, it had this little like stand you could put the score on. So I would put my synth on there, and it was a mini like Casio synth with a little sampling function, and I would like try and do combinations and sampling inside of that little Casio thing. I had like I don't know, like half a second of that stuff, of the sampling capacity, but I would still like try and experiment and come up with stuff, record it with my tape deck. And it was not just about playing, and it was mostly about finding interesting combinations with different sound sources and see where it would essentially lead me, And I was really just obsessed with this stuff. That's all I was doing.
That's amazing. I love that. That's one of the coolest like little getting started stories that I've heard on the podcast. Just using these Casio keyboards as recording. That's amazing.
Yeah. Well, that's what I had, and I was like, to me, that was like incredible. It's like, it was fun. Yeah.
So then, as far as learning the actual like technical side of things and getting more into the recording, editing, and mixing side of things, how did you go about learning that part of it? Was that all self-taught, or did you ever go to school for it?
Not only completely self-taught, but I think that I have my own way I have my own rules, I guess, and my own processes, that some of the stuff that I've instinctively started to do, I realized that a lot of people are doing, and some of the stuff, I guess, are my own little ways of doing things. But I didn't learn. I mean, this isn't fair to say. Obviously, when you're in studio sessions, my first studio sessions, the studio engineer, obviously, I asked him a lot of questions, and what is this, that, and then I realized that also he had a lot of questions. I mean, just mind you, my first sessions when I was, 16 or 17, back in Montreal, actually, the internet, forums, those things weren't things, right? Yet, not as open and like share your secret and all this stuff. And the use of, for example, in Montreal, at least, maybe not Montreal, but like with that guy, I was aiming for how can you get this vocal sound that I'm hearing on records, but that you're not getting out of your Behringer compressor. What's that tone that I'm hearing? And we had to actually hustle to Pro Audio rental shop and ask questions. And literally, the guy just hands us like an LA3 and an 1176 and say, okay, look, this is the secret, right? And that's the secret to that tone that you're hearing. all those like over harmonics that are making the vocal sound the way it sounds. That's not machine. Like, literally, this was the era. So learning by asking, and I was just not really surrounded by answers, but just, I guess, obsession. And again, back then there was a lot of omerta about what gear was used and how and why, and all these things were still, kind of a magician's secret type mentality. So just asking, figuring things out, try and error. I remember doing whole records. If I liked the tone of something, I would run everything through it. Back then, I remember I was a fan of T-Rex 24, the standalone version. And I did records that when they heard it, when people were hearing it, they were like, wow, this sounds like really, very analog and mixed on console. No, every single track I essentially run individually and kind of processed inside of T-Rex. And not knowing I was also using the clipper pretty much on every track, re-exporting it, balancing it, and already getting a sound that's very interesting. I was never talking about what I was doing, but yeah, T-Rex 24 was a thing for me for a while, like the standalone one.
I love that. I mean, that just goes to show, like, it's just trusting your ears at that point, right? And really leaning into what you knew to be the sound.
At the end of the day, the ears, the palette, right? Palette, do people, same thing, this and this is the same. Do people have to train their palette to know that shit tastes like shit? No, it tastes like shit, right? So your body knows. And some people think it's a brain thing. It's not. It's literally, we know. This and this the same. So if you trust this, then hustle, and then you'll figure it out.
Yeah, I love that. That's amazing. So I'm curious then, looking back at that experience of the sales guy telling you, oh, you need the LA3 and the 1176, did that change the sound for you, or was it completely. At that point?
Completely.
Okay.
Yes. Oh my God. Yeah. I was like, oh, but that's it. That's the sound. We run it through it, and a little bit of EQ. Back then, we were mixing in I was mixing in Ensoniq Paris. I don't know if you remember that thing. You know what that is? Oh my God. Yeah. I mean, so it was very limited. We had like a bunch of Waves plugins, legit plugins. And it's true, actually. We were all licensed up. And Ensoniq Paris. And so we used the EQs of Ensoniq Paris and the Wave stuff. But everything was pre-recorded. All the vocals pre-recorded or re-recorded through those devices, essentially. The LA3, mostly the LA3 for rap vocals, just still is great, by the way. Really good stuff. Yeah.
So looking back at this now, like, I mean, you said getting that gear definitely changed things. Do you feel like going back to like that Behringer compressor that you were using, do you think now with what you know, you would still be able to get good results with that? Or
now, yes, I could use it. And I could like compensate, prior or pre or post for what's lacking. But I could get a basic type of control action, just dynamically speaking, and then compensate for what that box can lack, essentially. Yeah, it's doable.
I just think, like, I asked that question because I know that there's a lot of people listening to this who might be thinking, well, does that mean that I need to get all this fancy gear and all that? But I think that, like, you could pretty much use any type of gear. You just need to understand how to use it to get the results you're looking for. Certain pieces will get you results faster, but it just comes down to really understanding that gear.
Not just understanding, but learning its sound. Like every, I can say with confidence, a lot of plugins have a inherent sound, something that the developers sometimes just infuse as part of the tone of the plugin, because they want right away when you turn it on the tone has a little uplift that makes you smile. And if you learn the sound of plugins, you'd be surprised. Sometimes I run things through plugins just for tone, while driving a bit, and it doesn't seem like it's doing anything, but it actually does something. And it's kind of an additive process. You can put tone 1 plus tone 3 plus tone 2, and then you just use a clean compressor. All of a sudden, you have something really interesting. You don't know why. Or you do the contrary. You compress clean and then add color. And again, sometimes you don't even need the functionality of X, Y, or Z plugin. You just need to know how they sound and react. and you have to just spend the time learning your colors like a painter. That's it. So it sucks because it's still a lot of hours, and I know that people don't like to spend hours doing things, but you'll get to a point where people will question, why do you work so many hours on X, Y, or Z, and then the same people will say, but how did you do this? So it's never wasted time. You just have to do it.
Yeah. So as far as like learning those colors and learning those tools, maybe some people might think that, like, you mentioned earlier that you could hear compression right away, which I think for a lot of people, that's a very difficult thing to hear. But as far as like learning colors of plugins, that again could also be something that's very subtle. So what advice do you have for people as far as learning how to understand what color does and how that impacts the sound?
Don't be afraid to, okay, it's going to sound crazy, but don't be afraid to listen in short loops in order to, what I see very, very often when people do A/B on YouTube, I feel they're doing it the completely wrong way for the purpose of the A/B. Usually a purpose of A/B is to demo a sonic imprint of something. And they're doing short musical loops, not just short loops. It needs to be one bar and repeating, and you listen 1, 2, 3, and then you switch, and right away, you won't focus on the music anymore. You'll only focus on the sound, and the differences are going to be obvious. And the flaw that I see in all these YouTube videos is they use, they just showcase their music for like 15 seconds and it's like the song changed already. I don't know what I'm looking at. And sometimes the difference is obvious, but most of the time it's completely pointless. And you don't get to learn the nuances and the subtleties of a processor. Short loops, the key. Right away, not only it's obvious, but you don't go crazy by spending a lot of time trying to hear the differences because they're super obvious. It's very simple.
Yeah, I think that's a great tip. Yeah, it's one of those things where even like you watch those YouTube videos and you have someone talking over the moment that they change the sounds and stuff like that, and it's like that kind of defeats like the switch. It makes it so much harder to hear. So
it is,
I agree with
and
what you're
again,
saying.
It has to be musical in the sense that we're usually producers. They're kind of born musicians, right? So don't do like an arbitrary like 1.7 second loop. Do it one bar. So that you're in the groove, you get the music, you forget about the music, all that's left is the sound. A/B, obvious. Done in 1 second, move on to the next. It's easy.
If you've been wanting to learn how to master your songs at a professional level so that you can feel proud of how good they sound and finally release them on digital platforms or make CDs or vinyl records, that kind of thing, if that sounds like you, listen up. My brand new course, Pro Home Mastering, is officially open for registration, but only for a few days. Inside this program, you're going to learn how to achieve loudness, clarity, and punch. You're going to gain a step-by-step repeatable process. You're going to know what tools to use, what to be listening for, so that ultimately, in the end, you can create tracks that compete with the pros, that translate across multiple playback systems, and so your music finally sounds the way it deserves to be heard. No more guessing, no more YouTube rabbit holes. Instead, this is clearly laid out for you in an easy-to-follow way. And if you sign up for the Pro plan, I will personally master one of your songs and create a personalized video walkthrough showing you exactly what I did and why. This way you can easily see how all the information in the course applies to mastering your music. Now, doors to registration close Saturday at 11:59 p.m. Eastern Time. So head over to prohomemastering.com to get all signed up. Once again, that is prohomemastering.com. And I'll see you inside the program. So yeah, you got started with this fairly early. You got into it. You fell in love with the production side of things. Where did the songwriting side of it come into place?
It was all one huge thing. I always had songs in my head that I couldn't produce. I had production ideas that I couldn't write. It was like just the whole thing was just one giant vision, essentially, of being able to put out a record that sounds sonically and feels musically the way that I have it in my head. I do a lot of my ideas and music ideas and groove ideas in my head, like a lot of people, some very often outside the studio, whether it's in the shower, it's in the car. It sounds super stereotypy, but this is when you don't have to. You have the organizational and technical brain completely off because it's like busy. Either it's like if you're driving, it's busy making sure you get to the studio alive. And so a lot of ideas I get outside the studio. When I come, I have recorded it. The typical thing like on the phone, and then I just have to execute. So where does the songwriting thing come from? Just from listening to a shit ton of music all the time, really. And at some point you understand, oh, I love this, I don't like that, and you start to getting your own identity by absorbing other people's work that you appreciate, not necessarily understanding why you like it, but knowing that you like it. But I didn't learn songwriting. It was just out of love, really.
Was the intention to do this for yourself as an artist, or were you planning right from the beginning to get into working with others?
Yeah, I just wanted to do, at the very beginning, I just wanted to do music for movies and commercials and mostly instrumental stuff. I was not into songwriting per se. I was into music composing, and songwriting came, fairly early on because of my sister. She brought two friends of hers at the house, and we started to work together. It was kind of a favor I was actually doing for my sister. And that favor turned out into a favor for me, essentially, because it worked well really, really quickly over there in Quebec. So I was like, well, that's interesting. Okay, maybe songwriting, record making is something that also is interesting. That's how it happened. But really, there was no plan to actually write songs. There was plan to make music that I love. I think that's what it is.
Yeah. So then once you realized that like you were a good songwriter, how did you go about finding other people to work with? Because I think there's a lot of people in that position where like they're good at writing their own music, and they, maybe they get into it for themselves, and then they realize, oh, maybe I can write for other people, that kind of thing.
I was lucky in that sense because the first few songs that I did with this Montreal hip hop duo, they're called MDS, gathered interest, and we had success from the get-go. So I was lucky to actually have a lot of doors open for me and being able to meet a lot of people early on because of that. I was still in college, actually, or high school, sorry, during that time. So you're young, all of a sudden you have a song that plays on the radio, it's a top 3. It was still possible back then, I guess, without having to hustle on social media. So that's how the word got around that there's a kid in town that also does. A couple of years after, actually, that duo got in the good graces of crooner in Montreal, a really well-known singer, big voice. He really loved what we did, and after the whole hip hop duo thing took off, he asked me to produce. That was in '99 or 2000. Half of his 7th album, me, a kid like this, because he also had heard all the stuff I was doing more into the scoring, my scoring capacity. I was doing a lot, before doing the hip hop duo, I was doing a lot of music for the local TV stations, the Radio Canada, which is the CBC division. And I was doing like their self-promotion and like little 5 seconds, 15 seconds, 30 seconds, little like music things for their, shows. And he heard the hip hop stuff. He heard that, and he said, "I want you to produce like half of my album." I'm like, "Really?" And I just said yes. I have no idea. And that year, the year I did this, one of the songs that I co-wrote and produced for him won the Song of the Year at they call it the Felix. The Felix is the French Canadian Junos, essentially. So it was a big deal back then and over there. That also helped me out to kind of like, okay, there's a kid in town. So yeah, that was it.
That's amazing. So what do co-write sessions look like for you these days? Like how do they normally function, or what's your workflow with those?
A lot of remote, actually. You'd be surprised. Like I get like acapellas, from artists that I can call friends now. I get in sessions with. 2 days ago I was with Derulo at his house where we often work I mean, everything is happening through WhatsApp now for me. It's like, it's like somebody hits you up. You're like, yeah, sure, okay. Do you have something? Yeah, I have this like little, instrumental. I was working a little sound design. A lot of back and forth with all these people. Yeah, I just I try to work as much as I can on records that have already a vehicle, because that's the trick. I mean, that's not the trick, but that's the problem. You can work on so many songwriting sessions, have amazing songs that will end up just not going anywhere. I always feel that it's better if you can at least have the artist early on have an interest in the whole thing. It makes for a better product, a better song, and it also ensures that you're not burning or draining yourself too much by just doing incredible job waiting for someone to realize, oh, this is great, but it has no home, And that's what I notice here. A lot of A&Rs and publishers and everything, that's the first thing they want to know is who are you close to as far as artists? Because they know that they won't be able to do better than a creator's connections they have together. So that's a pretty big deal, actually. Pretty big deal.
That's interesting. That is a very good point. If someone's going to sign you as a publisher, then they want to know that you have that network there to have success with it, as opposed to them having to do all the work.
Oh, it's crazy. You can be, let's just say you're the best. But if you're the best in your studio, they literally won't be able to help you. And that's the hush secret, is that they truly can't help you. They can't help you get discovered, because now the entire ecosystem relies on you and yourself to make your own promotion, which I'm really bad at, by the way. So I'm so grateful that I didn't come up or start in the recent years, because it's a hustle. It's hard because the talent is almost like just a pre-requirement to actually start a music career. The rest, and I would say 80%, 70% of everything is how loud you are on, your socials and stuff like this. It's what it is.
Well, you talked about how ideas will come to you from an artist through WhatsApp, which is kind of crazy to me. So for a lot of people, they're the producer who just works on a project and the artist has all the songs written, and it's more about getting the right sounds or the right takes. Whereas it sounds like in your case, people are submitting maybe just an acapella or something, and it sounds like they're at that point saying, "Hey, I want you to produce my record." But at that point, it almost sounds like you're the one composing stuff. You're making the music at that point to suit that acapella. Am I correct in that assumption there?
Yeah, that happens very often. Sometimes people want a different take on the song that they have, and they're sure that they like the song, but for some reason in the execution or in its final form, they're not happy with it. And then they kind of make it bare bone or just the acapella, and they're like, okay, I'm happy with that. But then when I put the music on top, I'm not happy. Maybe something's wrong with the production. And then I get sent a lot of these. But again, I have to be super selective with who I do this, because it's a lot of time. Production's hard. It's good production. Good production, it's time consuming, and it's time, right? It's time. So you have to be very selective.
Yeah. So it almost sounds like in your world that production and co-writing, it's kind of the same thing. It's just you're ultimately working on shaping the song to be the best version, whether you're writing it or not.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Here, it's funny because I had never heard this term before, but here in LA was the first place I heard the term finisher. Have you heard this term before?
I've heard it before, yeah, but go ahead, explain it.
Yeah, essentially a finisher is somebody who can come in and kind of help finish the song and bring it to its max potential. So a finisher would act as some sort of not a doctor, but a doctor, and also just an advisor as well. This is where attention needs to go, or this is what I need to do to help it out, or this is what you need to do. Maybe your structure is wrong, or maybe the sonics are wrong. Maybe the whole thing feels like it's dragging, doesn't groove right, So yeah, I do feel like I do a lot of stuff, which is fun to me because it's almost like in nature.
Yeah. So since you do often take on multiple roles, like being a composer or the arranger or the mixer, that kind of thing, how do you compartmentalize the creative versus the technical side of things? Because for some people, the technical can get in the way, right?
Yeah, completely. So I have a rule of thumb to write really fast, because I write really fast, but I can take quite some time to produce correctly, because sound design is the sport. Your sonics, especially here in LA, the sonics are everything. People react to sonics before they react to a musical idea. It's very, and finishing sonics, there's ways to go really quick. I have my own little hacks when I want to spend some time on it, but not too much. There are hacks where you can almost like fake incredible sonics, but it can be dangerous, because these hacks, they can translate well in 60, 70% of systems. You never know where the person is going to listen to what you're sending, right? So you can actually hack it for a phone, and then you play it in a club, and it's terrible. So, but I would say this, my rule of thumb now is I produce in the mud. So I gotta go quick with all the ideas and all of the MIDI parts. I write super quick. I try and structure super quick something that I know has potential, without worrying too much about any non-essential sound selection. You see what I'm saying? So I will write a bass line. If I have a great hook that I spent maybe an hour that kind of like making feel right, then I'll write around it really quickly, and then I'll get back to it and I'll produce later on. But I'll never do that process in one session. You lose too much perspective if you're trying to get the right sonics right away on each and every individual element. You're gonna start losing your perspective credit, and you need a lot of that to finish a song.
I love that. That's great advice, because yeah, that's one of the things that I hear from people all the time, is that they spend like weeks or months, years sometimes working on songs, because they're just so in the weeds of like trying to get the perfect sounds. And, maybe they had a melody in their head and now they're perfecting the tone of that melody, but they've lost sight of what that rhythm should have been behind it and all that stuff.
Mind you, I've done that. I've done that on songs that I haven't applied my rule on. That has happened to me, to have to revisit songs, over and over. Not completely working only on that for months, never. But, I'm like, man, that song had potential and I fucked it up in the execution. And I'm like opening the project and I'm like, oh, it's a mess. I hear it right away. And so I have a few songs that are circling back that I know have potential, that need help, that I fucked up because I didn't follow my rule. And I have to go into the under infrastructure of the song and rebuild it sonically so that it like stands like a straight building and doesn't collapse. And but when I do my rule of working in the mud, that never happens, and it goes way quicker. So that's the thing. It's like I think separating the processes is key to actually make sure that you get the best product as quickly as possible. You have to stop yourself from producing when you're writing, essentially, or from overproducing when you're writing. Once you're securely sitting on a good song, then you can like geek and just like go crazy.
Fair. Yeah, I think it's also important because like there's that idea of demoitis, that like the more you hear something, the more you become married to it. So if you're just like focusing on one small element and you sit on that forever, then like it's so hard to hear anything else. But when you at least focus on like, let's just get the foundation of this song, right? Let's get the rhythm, the melody, the hook. Once you have like that's the core of the song. So at least if you're gonna have demoitis to the core of the song, like that's good,
Totally. Absolutely.
Yeah. With you, like you're often working with like a lot of different styles of music and different genres and even sometimes languages, like how does that play a role in like what you're doing too, as far as like coming up with those parts and those
hilarious hooks? I mean most of my successes have been in French, actually, and yet here I'm known as I was known in the Gente era as the Latin guy. I was like, no, I barely speak English. I mean, I can order my way around a Mexican place, but I speak a bit of Spanish, to be fair. But it's hilarious, actually. It has opened so many doors for me, though. Very grateful for this moment. Yeah, it was fun.
As a writer, like what do you do to help stay relevant as far as understanding musical trends or maybe even cultural trends too, because you're working in so many different languages?
Ask feedback. Always. I always ask feedback. And you know what? The feedback is that's the thing that's the toughest to get usually. But I will ask feedback about trends, lyrics in a song I'm having doubt about, structure, everything. I think that getting information, trying it out on your own, and then trying to get feedback. I think it's good. I think it's a good way to feel relevant and to stay relevant. Like, okay, what? And also, I just look at what the kids are doing all the time. Like, especially the kids who are saying like your music sounds old. You're like, really? Okay, teach me. Like, teach me what's cool. And I'm serious. Like, I'm like, show me why you like what you like. And just like, I'll just humbly listen, and I'll be like, oh wow, it's interesting. I could use some of that, not all, but some of that in what I'm doing.
Interesting. It's interesting you say that, because I read an article with you where you were talking about the making of the song Savage Love. And in that article, you talked about how the song originally started with an idea that was a little TikTok-ish. I think that was the term you used.
Smash, actually, yeah. It was a TikTok, like the whole production, not the whole production, not the final one, but the beats by Jawsh was already viral on TikTok. Yeah.
Interesting. I was going to ask, like, what does that mean to be TikTok-ish? Because I think there's a lot of people that would want that, to have a song that's like taking off on any sort of social platform, right?
And what does it mean? I mean, it's fun, I guess. It's fun. It's surprising as well. I personally was not seeing this thing coming, and I think that when I heard the I mean, I don't even think I wasn't on TikTok when we started to work on that song. And I don't know if in that article I was mentioning, we probably worked on a B version as well. That was different. And when we were working on that B version, all the feedbacks we got were good, except for one that was key. That said, no, go back to the TikTok thing. But I did not have TikTok at the time. My aim was to try and make the coolest record possible with Jason. And that was it. And so we kind of made a hybrid at the end. But yeah, it's just surreal, man. I don't know. It's like a new, it was a new era. I hear it was like the first TikTok smash or something like that. It was the TikTok song, mainstream song success. That's what I hear. I'm not even sure it's real, but it was a success.
Well, speaking of like following those trends, like how much consideration do you actually put into thinking about a song's virality, or like the ability for it to catch on like social platforms? Is that even a factor when you're writing?
I used to have a lot of conviction about this, and I just don't anymore. I really don't anymore. The ecosystem and the landscape has changed so much that I think I know when people know. I find out when they find out. Because I don't listen to music the same way a young music lover and fan listens to music. I listen to music a bit differently. First of all, because of what I do, my profession, and also because I'm just not consuming. I didn't start consuming music with streaming. I come from like buying CDs. Like I still have my whole like big collection of like 700 or 800 CDs with the booklet and everything. So this consumption, fast consumption, skip to the next mode of listening to music probably makes all these people and all these kids gravitate towards something different that I would. You know what I mean? Maybe they gravitate. I just don't know. I humbly have no clue. And I feel that most of the people in the industry never admit to this, but it's up in the air, man. You can be certain that you have an incredible song and it doesn't connect. And it happens. It happens, and it doesn't mean the song's not good. It could be because it's 2 years too late, 2 years too early. It could be for so many reasons. So your gut that you have, this is a really good song, and it should find its audience. Sometimes the only real thing you just said is it's a good song or it's a really good song. Finding the audience is not in your hands. You never know. For some reason, it's becoming more and more difficult to predict this stuff.
Interesting. So then, in your mind, what makes a good song in your mind?
As a songwriter, a good song is a good song. Usually your peers will be, it's a good song. It has to fall in the like/love category. If it falls in the problem, don't like it category, then it's not a good song. It's almost like, really, like, this is a good song, this is a bad song. Great song, I don't know what that is anymore. I mean, I say that, and then I'm like ginormous like Max Martin fan who does only great songs for some reason. But I think that your peers know, right? So if you get enough like peer feedback about this is a great song, you're sitting on a great song. Doesn't mean it can have success. It doesn't mean that it will find its audience. It means that it's a great song. It's a good song.
Are there any common mistakes that you see artists making with their songs when they come to you looking for production help that maybe are preventing those songs from being great songs or good songs?
It's a good question. I think they're not. It seems to be it's different from one person to the next. I usually hear problems right away, and I'm not talking about sonic problems. It can be anything really. It can be that this melody is not interesting. It's dragging too long. It can sound like doesn't sound right, doesn't groove right. It can be very, very different and multiple things. So it's very difficult to name advices that I would give. It's tricky. I always tell people just listen. And if you don't hear it, stop listening. Go back to it in a month. And the problems, you'll hear them right away. Write them down. You need if you're doing this, usually you have a good sense of what's a good song and what's a bad song. If you're doing this enough, right? So if you don't hear it anymore and you're lost, it's because you're emotionally not reacting to the flaws of the song, and you need to get some perspective back, and you need to take a break from it.
Yeah, I think that perspective is an important factor, and it's the same reason why someone would come to you for feedback too, right? It's like I think when most people are writing,
perspective because I never heard this stuff before.
Of course, yeah. And for most people, when you're writing, it's just like you're inspired. Something in your head's telling you, I need to record this idea, and so you do it, and you're stoked about it. And then, I think when you have that perspective and you can listen back like a month later or whatever, you can actually say to yourself, maybe this wasn't the greatest, or you send it off to someone else, and they can tell you that too. Hopefully, you have someone who's going to be honest with you, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And honesty is also something like you have to be able to execute and deliver properly, with velvet gloves, because it's their babies. Creation is like having a little baby, It really is. It's your thing. It came out of you. It's a bit sick. You don't know why. So what's going on? But that's the thing. I think that after a while, you do stop reacting. Your emotional system is not reliable anymore. Right? You're desensitized to the good qualities and the flaws of the song. That's the main issue. That's why people get lost in songs, because they don't feel things anymore when they hear that material. So it's perspective peel. So take a break or ask someone else and take notes.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I do want to briefly talk about your mixing side of things too, and you make amazing mixes. And one of the tracks that I know you worked on as well is Gente, which was obviously a humongous song for you as well. And one of the things that I read about that song was that you guys had actually tried to master that song multiple times because you were trying to get the low end right, and then ultimately you ended up just sticking with the original mix. Can you tell us a little bit about what was that process like, and what specifically were you listening for when it came to the mastering side of things and making sure that low end sounded?
There was multiple things, multiple stages. I first sent the record to. So I did the mix of the song, and then we sent it to a mastering studio in France, and we got an okay result, but it wasn't up to where I think it should have been. And so I remember sending I told Willy, maybe let's just try this guy in Las Vegas. And it came out very dynamic, but it came out too dynamic. Okay. So at the end of the day, what I did is I had to take a perspective peel, didn't listen to it for a while, and then I re-executed the master because the mix was good, and I re-executed the master. And the whole thing came out of my Sonar 8.5 session, mind you. Yes, it's crazy. So essentially, this was the process. Just one of those where I didn't have the perspective to actually deliver it right. We tried one, we tried twice. The second one was almost there, but it wasn't it, it just wasn't it completely. And then the third try was my own. And then that's the one that got released.
In that same article that I read about that song, you described the original mix as having like a very clipped sound. And I'm curious to know, like, what role does clipping ultimately play in your productions?
It depends on the clipper. There's ways to clip that you would never know. There's still some secrets actually about clipping. It's crazy. And some are completely slept on. Like there's one clipper that you don't even know is a clipper out there. That is the magic box. It's the most transparent way to turn your mix as loud as you want almost. And you'll never hear it. And which is what I used on Mi Gente actually.
Do tell. Come on. You teased it so well. No. You got to tell us what it is.
I can't because it's almost a mistake.
All right.
my friend Aris. Oh my God. I think he's the only guy on the planet I told about this stuff. Aris Arcontis from Archon. Great guy, by the way. Incredible recording engineer and producer. Incredible studio too. And I remember going back and forth with him. I'm like, bro, listen, okay, this is A, B, C, clipper. Look, what sounds better? And he was like, fuck. It's one of those. Come on, I'll run it a few more years and then we'll see. We'll talk about it eventually.
Yeah, fair. But as far as like using clipping, like you talked about how like different clippers will have different sounds, but like what are you focusing on generally when you're using a clipper? Like what goal do you have going into it?
Zero distortion, just volume. Essentially, a clipper should help you turn your volume loud and clean. I mean, that's like the utopia, right? About clipping. It's the utopia, right? You want to push into it and then you don't want to hear distortion or audible, annoying, obvious, noisy distortion. So yeah, at the very, very last stage is an interesting thing, and which is crazy because most people will say clip and then limit. I go in situations where I can just clip because it's so clean. I don't. If I have obviously enough dynamic control in my mix and there's no transient that are like all over the place and it's a solid mix, the energy is right, it's punchy enough. All I need to do is turn the volume up, and I don't want no dynamic attenuation from a limiter. That clipper is incredible. But you have to, again, probably I will say this: you have to have the credit to go into that clipper and get that extra, volume. You have to have the credit. Your product, your execution has to have enough credit to go into it. Although I would say if you don't have enough credit to go into it, it's still the loudest. Still is.
What do you mean by credit for people who maybe have never used a clipper before and don't understand?
You've done your job as far as like controlling what's important in your mix. So your dynamics right, your kick-bass relationship is right, all the ranges are controlled and sound pleasant, and punchy enough and clear enough. And the mid-range is focused, and your mix sounds like it's done. And usually, I will say this: one incredible advice I got very early on from a recording engineer in Montreal, because I was always like, when do you know you're done with the mix? And he said, when nothing. It was incredible. When nothing bothers me. It was not about liking it for him. It was not about loving it. It was when nothing bothers me, and I was like, that's kind of cool, because if you love the song and nothing bothers you about it, the love box is checked and the technical aspect is checked. You see?
Interesting.
What I'm saying?
Yeah, that's an interesting way of framing it.
I thought it was incredible. I always use that actually. This is still in my head all the time.
Yeah. I feel like a lot of that has to do with like workflow, because like I hear from people all the time that like they're working on their own music. So by that definition, like they should love their songs. But then they spend forever because there's always stuff that bothers them. But maybe they're not actually focusing on the mix itself. They're focusing more on the music, and maybe not making that distinction.
And this is when I like to talk about credit a lot. And this is where the emotional credit can actually sabotage the whole process, because people forget that they run out of that credit not because the song is getting bad, just because of hours of listening. That's it. So something that feels incredible to you and you're super excited about, if you play it like for hours and hours, at some point you won't feel good about it. You're right. You don't have that credit anymore, but it doesn't mean that it should change. This is what one of the mistakes that a lot of people do, is that they keep changing it because they are desensitized to it. So they're never getting anything better. They're getting something different. You know, it's completely ridiculous. They're getting different. They're not getting better.
So as far as your workflow goes and making sure that you have that perspective still, like how long does it normally take you to complete a mix?
Mixing is just fairly fast, actually. Production is what will take time. But mixing, usually when you're done producing, you should be 85% there.
So you're like mixing as you're writing?
No. I would say I'm mixing as I'm producing.
Gotcha. So then, yeah, you're kind of just at that point, I guess, going back to that finisher idea. You're kind of coming into the mix as the finisher and just getting the ultimate balance of it all from the technical perspective, right?
Yeah.
Now, with the tracks that you work on a lot of stuff that has massive low end. So what are some of your tricks there for getting low end to sound big and clear? Because that's such a huge part of your mixes that just really stands out.
It's never the same thing. For that Quentale record, for example, I know that the low end, one of the big impacts of that sub and the kick and sub is actually the ML4000 in expansion mode. It really did something nice for that song for some reason. Yeah, it really worked well. The expander section of the ML4000 low end band lifted up slightly. It made a substantial difference to me, and I loved it right away. I was like, I'm going to keep that. But I tried a few things. I had it gelled very tight, and I'm like, okay, how can I make it like more feeling inflated? That was one thing that really worked well.
Yeah. Do you feel like, as far as getting that low end, how early into the process are you focused on that low end? Is it just part of that production and getting the right sounds to begin with, or
the right sounds? Not necessarily the right sonics yet, but the right sounds. Meaning that that kick plus that bass work together well. And it's easy to get a certainty. You feel it right away, right? It's punchy and the drivers are moving right. It's not flubby, nothing like this, right? So if you get tight and cohesive kick and bass sounds, even without even right away starting to sidechain or separate, if this sounds musically and emotionally pleasing, sound selection is done, and then there's many ways to enhance them, right? With again sidechain, with harmonic enhancement and parallel processes, saturation, all these things. Those are like more like the seasoning, I guess, or the how am I going to cook those two selected elements that are inherently working together. So the sound selection, very important, doesn't need to be finalized right away. It just needs to have the potential to be finalized well, so that you can move on to something else.
Mm-hmm. So it sounds like you're kind of listening more for like making sure that the sounds like, it's all about how they interact with each other and making sure you've got the right thump and the right attack and all that.
Yeah. Like if you have a subby kick and a subby bass, you're gonna run into trouble. I mean, you don't even need to hear it. It makes a lot of sense, right? You will run into polarity issues, phase issues, alignment issues. It'll feel this way. If it'll feel wrong, so you either try and see how you can correct with the tool, or you switch right away. But that's one of the things that I miss from back then, is that the sound selection process was actually quicker than with all the tools we have right now. It's like, it's crazy, having your hands on the dial of a sampler and flipping through samples, all these things is. So now we have like billions and all these soft synths, but we don't have the hands-on as much as we used to before, and that plays a lot into the problems that a lot of people are experiencing, where they're getting loopy because even after like the whole like working in the box thing has become real in the last 20 years, I guess. They still haven't completely figured out how to interface with the software. It's still, controllers are okay. Mouse is terrible, and I use a mouse. It sucks, right? They're more focused on new sounds and things that have nothing to do with the interaction with the plugin. And UI flaws is the biggest problem in our industry. The way to interact with software leaves a lot to be desired, still to this day. And back then, when we had like samplers and romplers and all these things, a lot of people who were designing these things were also musicians. They were not just coders. They're not just developers. So they understood that stuff, which most developers do not understand that stuff.
Yeah. I feel like one of the biggest problems is just that there's like overwhelm these days. It's like there's so many samples, especially you got like things like Splice where you have like infinite samples, and then you got all these plugins, and everyone says that their plugin's the next greatest thing, and then the GUIs and everything you just talked about. Like there's so much overwhelm in the setup of the track that like putting it all together is kind of it can be a lost art to some degree. And I think, as far as finding good sounds, you alluded that like back in the day it was faster for you, and it's probably because you had those limitations. So maybe working with a limited workflow or a limited set of samples is just the way to go for a lot of people, and not buying into all the hype.
Some of the fun I had before buying my first instrument, I was into tracker music. I don't know if you know what that is.
No.
You know what mod files are? Mod? MOD?
MOD. I feel like I've seen them, but yeah, I'm not too familiar with them.
The tracker scene is kind of a geek PC scene where musicians, coders, and graphic artists would team up and do what's called demos. And it's essentially, it would be like a little program executable with graphics and with music. And you'd show your skills this way. And the music was encoded into a bunch of different formats. There was the ST2 format, the mod format, the XM format, and I was programming music back on my old PC while I was still in high school, just for fun on a tracker program. It's literally I was entering every single event manually, but it was fun. It was fun, very limiting, but you would come with creative ways to actually come up with delays, for example, by copying an event by musical value and then decaying the volume, and you would create crazy stuff. Like very impressive display of skills as far as like music programming, and super limited as far as the interface, but not contrived. Still open. It's just like put the time and you can make pretty much anything you want. So yeah, limitation is a great thing that's completely overlooked, for sure.
Yeah. So at the end of the day, like what ultimately in your mind makes a great sounding mix? I mean, you talked about how you know when it's done, but what makes a good sounding mix?
When you just hear a song, like you just hear, essentially you just feel and hear, you hear a record and you feel it. It's the most like generic thing ever. But when you go, after you eat, I don't know, a greatly prepared meal, again, your palate. And the thing is, like, I think that most people, it's very difficult for a chef to enjoy his own meal or to know if it's like cooked right. He will want the feedback from the table, right? It's the same thing, And then, I mean, obviously, repeatability can be key. So if you've been able to serve a good meal in your kitchen and your kitchen hasn't changed that much, then there's a good probability that people will react fairly the same. So, I think it's a time thing, right? A good mix is because it's coming from a process and a place that has proven itself in time more than the mix itself. You see what I mean? It's almost like the mix is like kind of it's a function of everything that comes prior. It's probably sound like bullshitty as F, but it's real. Predictability is super important. This is what Serban has. Serban has predictability. He has a sound. He has a sound that he imprints in any song. Why is that? You think it's a technique? It's not a technique. It's a workflow. And it's a room. And it's a methodology. But this isn't the technical thing. It's what he does, which is that sound. right? So you in order to develop that sound, which is, all your seasonings and the what you do for dynamics, for bass, if you work on your sound, you can deliver a mix.
Makes sense. Yeah, because once you have that, then you build that workflow, you build those templates.
It's crazy, but it's a tunnel, literally. You have to just make sure your tunnel is also, it can expand and it can compress, right? Your tunnel, but it's still a tunnel that you've designed, and you're running elements through that tunnel, and you expect sound to come out of the tunnel being transformed, but with a predictability. And then there's like this little a little leeway, right? That where you can adjust or you can but that's what it is. Because else a great mix is a great mix. I mean, a great mix is you feel the vocal and it's stumping. But it's really everything that the sounds are going through. So your brain, your methodology, the choice of gear, not the gear, but the choice. Why you choosing this over that? And and translatability, obviously.
For sure. I couldn't agree more with that, because I think that like the workflow is such a big part of it, and those decisions that you make as an engineer are going to impact are going to achieve the sound that you ultimately believe is the right sound. And when you build those workflows, those templates, those decision making processes, everything becomes so much more streamlined, and you can get the result that you want so much faster. So yeah, man, I totally agree with that, and love that you brought that up. Man, this has been awesome. I've really enjoyed learning about the way you work and the way you think about all this stuff. And I just want to say thank you for taking the time to do this. If people want to learn more about you, maybe even work with you, what's the best way for them to do that?
They can check my Instagram at philgreiss.com. That's pretty much where I hang sometimes, and when I get to chat with people about different things. Also, a little plug, I have my plugins coming up this year. The first one should be released hopefully very shortly. That I'm doing in collaboration with Pulsar. So it should be fun. This year should be fun.
Awesome. I'll have to look out for those for sure.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right on, man. Well, Phil, thank you so much for doing this. I really appreciate it.
Pleasure. I really appreciate your time too. Thank you so much. Thanks, Mike.
So that was my interview with Phil Greiss, and I just really appreciated learning more about how he structures his workflow so that he can work really fast and he can really lean into his instincts and trust his ears, trust his gut. I thought it was really cool to hear how he implements this in things like writing, where he just, the way he writes of just getting the foundation of a song before he even worries about tones and sounds and the sonics. I think that's a really important thing that it's so easy to just get wrapped up in when you're working in digital technology these days. Like when you're writing in the box and you've got plugins of different amp sims and different drum sounds and all that kind of thing. It's just so easy to get lost in that stuff and to lose sight of the overall song. So I thought it was really cool to hear him talk about his process there. And I also like what he was talking about as far as building a workflow that gives you predictability. That is such a massive part of this. I think that's probably one of the biggest lessons you need to take from this episode, is that when you establish a workflow and when you tell yourself, this is what I'm going to do now, this is what I'm going to do next, this is how I'm going to analyze my tracks, and this is what I do when I want this scenario, or this is what I do when I want that scenario. When you have that workflow really, really well defined in your mind, it allows you to work fast, it allows you to be predictable, it allows you to get the results that you're looking for, but without all that second guessing and doubting. Because like you talked about, the sign of a good mix or knowing when a mix is done is often when things don't bother you. And if you've built the workflow so that you're making all these decisions along the way, by the time you get through that workflow, nothing should be bothering you. So it is good to get very clear on what that is. And for myself personally, I have a 6-step workflow that I teach all my students inside my coaching program. And for me, it's the way I've mixed forever. And it just allows me to know exactly when to move on to the next thing, when not to sweat the small stuff. And yeah, I think that that's a trap that a lot of people fall into, is just that they're constantly searching their mixes for problems. And when you're doing that, as opposed to having a workflow to move through, when you're looking for problems, you're always going to find problems. You're going to make problems up in your mind. You're going to lose perspective. You got to get very clear on what does that process look like? How do you know when to move on? And I thought it was really cool to hear Phil talk about that in this interview. I think it's so important. Now, if you need help with establishing your workflow and you want to learn my personal workflow, inside of my coaching program, Amplitude, that's exactly what I do with my students. I walk you through what that workflow looks like. We're walking through how to record your tracks, edit your tracks, mix them. And we establish very early on, what is it that you want your music to sound like? And then we come up with a very clear game plan to help you achieve those results. And throughout the entire process, I'm working with you, walking you through that process, giving you feedback along the way, helping you mix your tracks with you so that ultimately you do get the results that you hear in your head to come out of your speakers. So if you want to have one-on-one help, get that feedback on your tracks, and gain the confidence of knowing what to be doing with your tracks to get them sounding as good as you've always wanted to hear them, make sure to check out masteryourmix.com/amplitude, and you can find all the details about that coaching program there. And on that page, there's a link where you can book a call with me. I'd love to learn more about you and your music, your goals, what's working for you, what's not working for you, and to see if I can help you. And I only work with people inside of this program who I truly believe I can help. If you're not a good fit, I'll let you know. I'm really focused on making sure that my students get results. And so that means that I have to be a little bit selective sometimes of who I choose to work with. But definitely, let's hop on a call. Let's talk about your music first. And let's figure out how we can get you the help that you need. So once again, that's masteryourmix.com/amplitude to get all the details there. And with that said, we've reached the end of this episode. Thank you so much for sticking around. And I can't wait to chat with you in the next one. We'll talk soon. Take care. Thanks for listening to the Master Your Mix podcast. Please make sure to subscribe on your favorite podcast app and leave a review. If you have any questions or comments for the podcast, send an email to questions@masteryourmix.com. And for more information on how to create pro recordings from your home studio, visit masteryourmix.com.